Hello, everypony. Scar 89 here. It is about 10:40 at night, so hey, why not record the next chapter of Hoennshy? So, get comfortable, because I think it's a long one. Chapter 2, Down the Beaten Path. Hey, are you alright back there? It might have gotten a little bumpy back there in the end, the silhouette asked, poking her head into the room. Fluttershy lowered her hoof from her face and looked outside with her eyes finally adjusted to the sunlight. Moving days always tough, huh, May? She said, laughing. The mare grabbed a cardboard box and carried it to a house where they had stopped. The mare was a blue-eyed earth pony with a yellow hide and a long brown mane. She wore an orange shirt with a red dress which covered her cutie mark. Well, don't you want to check out the house? After wiping the tears from her eyes, Fluttershy timidly jumped out of the room. She was confused by what she saw. There was flora and fauna that she had never seen in Equestria. Vast forests surrounded the small town, filled with wolves with gray and black patterns, striped ferrets, and tiny red-spiked worms, to name a few. The sight filled Fluttershy's eyes with wonder. A loud thud snapped her out of her dreamy state, forcing her to turn her head. She watched as two blue stallions carried the last of the boxes out of the truck and brought them into the large house. Fluttershy trotted to the mare, just catching her before she went inside. "Excuse me, miss? Where is this place?" she asked. The mare stared at her blankly, looking straight through her. Fluttershy stepped back. "I mean, do you know how I get back to Ponyville from here?" The mare laughed, greatly confusing Fluttershy. "Oh, May, what are you talking about now? Did you bump your head in the truck?" she asked, examining Fluttershy's head. "Oh, you have the wrong pony. My name is Fluttershy," she explained, trying to keep her composure. "Is that what you're calling yourself now?" The mare came closer, placing her hoof around the back of Fluttershy's neck. Fluttershy shrank back in discomfort. Nothing in this town made any sense to her. She tried analyzing what had happened as she was unknowingly dragged into the two-story wooden house. Finally, Fluttershy snapped out of her train of thought and looked around the room. The home was filled with technology she had never seen before, and pictures of strange creatures in picture frames. "All your stuff is in your room now. Go get it ready," the mare explained, nudging Fluttershy up the stairs. Slowly she went up. Her mind was on autopilot until she had time to absorb everything that had happened. Down the hallway and to the right she found a room filled to the brim with cardboard boxes. "This must be it." She trotted to the center of the room and sat on the floor. It was quiet enough for her to focus on her predicament. She closed her eyes and cleared her mind, something she had not done in weeks. "Poor hummingbird, its wing is still damaged. How will I get back home? Will any pony ever notice I'm gone? What about that one pony that tried to help me?" Fluttershy's eyes jolted open. She lifted both of her hoofs to her face, trying to think of the pony's name. "Oh my! How could I have forgotten her name?" She started to shake. All the stress and anguish rushed back to her. "Did I really forget her name? No, it's just the stress. What would Rainbow something do?" All she wanted to do was break down. Two names slipped past her. Even under stress, Fluttershy would never forget her childhood friend's name. She began to reach her breaking point. It was too much. She raised her head from her hooves and saw something strange at the other side of the room. It was a simple mirror, but the reflection staring back at her seemed off. Getting up to her hooves, she trotted over and looked at herself. Between thinking and worrying about her new-found problems, she never noticed the clothes that she had on. An orange sleeveless jacket with a black bent collar was secure on her body. A green tied back bandana covered the top of her pink hair. She turned to see her flank, noticing a pair of black short pants with pink butterflies decoration sewn into both sides. A green satchel was secured on her back as well. Before she could properly react, she heard the mare call out from downstairs. "Come down, May! Your father's on TV! Oh, and make sure you change your clothes before you come down." "Coming down, Mom!" Without hesitation, she slammed her hooves into her mouth. "What's happening to me?" was all that she could think about as her legs carried her down the stairs. seemingly on their own. When she reached the bottom, a small stint of dizziness came over her, but she shook it off and continued toward the mare. With a blank face, she turned to see the one she called Mom watching the TV. The only image on the screen was a news anchor who had just finished talking about the events. "You missed it," the mare pouted. "Oh, I know. You should go introduce yourself to the neighbors." I, I, no, the Pegasus squeaked in protest. Her cries went unanswered as the mare nudged her to leave. She sighed and lowered her head. It took all her strength to fight the pass she had been given, and until she had some food and rest, she decided to simply go with it. She arrived at the door, gulped, and knocked. There was no answer. She waited a few seconds and tried it again. Still nothing. Sighing a breath of relief, she trotted around the corner to see what the rest of the town had to offer. Like Ponyville, which she was surprised she could even remember, the weather was balmy. A small breeze rustled every leaf on the trees. The sound calmed her down. Between the sounds of the leaves, a loud yell took Fluttershy out of her serene state yet again. She looked around in a panic, waiting for the sound to come back again. After perking her ears up, she heard a second cry. "Help!" she thought she heard. Without hesitation, her legs carried her to the northern path out of town to find the source of the voice. "No, no, no!" Twilight yelled out in frustration. She took the hardcover book and tossed it off her reading stand. It landed in a large pile on the floor where the rest of her books now sat. Nothing she read through came close to any explanation as to what had happened. Twilight didn't want to accept the ancient spellbook's interpretation. There had to be another explanation. She hastily brought over more books to scour when she heard a knock on the door. After her next book arrived, she yelled out, "Come in!" and started to browse through it. She ignored the squeak coming from the door, thinking of the best way to explain the whole situation. "We're all here, Twilight," Applejack stated, walking in. She was followed closely by 3 other ponies, a unicorn, a pegasus, and an earth pony like herself. Twilight finally turned around, seeing them stare at the mess of books that overtook her floor. "Now what's going on here?" Twilight gulped and looked at them all nervously. She has never had to deal with any type of deviation happening from any of her spells, and this one might have cost her good friend. After tightly closing her eyes from stress, she opened them to confront the 4 ponies. "Something's happened to Fluttershy a few days ago, and it's my fault." She could hear her friend's reaction. Sighing, she continued, "She came to my house and asked me for help. I found a spell to help her out, and something must have gone wrong." "Wait, what kind of help?" the blue rainbow-haired Pegasus demanded. "She wanted me to make her less threatening to help a patient. I found an old spell to help, but there was a risk of a deviation to occur." "Fluttershy? Threatening?" the pink frizzy-haired earth pony interrupted. "That's silly. Whatever gave her that idea?" "I don't know. Just listen." All the interruptions began to frustrate her, but she didn't want to lose her cool. She was still scared of how her friends were going to react. "I performed a spell, and it took so much magic that I blacked out. When I woke up, Fluttershy was gone, and no one has seen her since." She started panicking. "Her animals are even out of control." "Is that what that spectacular light show was?" the white-purple-maned unicorn asked in a refined tone. "I thought you were having an amazing soiree with an amazing light show finale." "I wish I was. Now, when I did the spell, a deviation occurred. The spell and the book are so close that one wrong calculation can make it a completely different spell." "Then, what happened?" Applejack asked. Twilight's ears drooped. She dreaded telling them what she had found in the old book, but she buried her fear and continued. "I only found 2 things that could have happened to her. Either we have a hollow, emotionless Fluttershy running around, or—" She paused for a second. The 4 ponies started whispering amongst themselves as they waited for her second option. "Or she was transported somewhere outside the space and time surrounding Equestria." Her friends' mouths were agape. They looked at each other, trying to find a word to break the silence. Say what now?" Applejack finally responded. "I don't know how to explain it. If that is what happened, she's somewhere we can't get to with normal means. Also, the book doesn't have a counterspell for either of those options." Twilight lowered her head, choking up a little. Applejack trotted forward and put her hoof on Twilight's back, causing Twilight to look up at her. We all make mistakes. Now, have you thought of anything with that big brain of yours? Twilight's horn glowed, bringing a book that was still on her stand to her and opened it up. After flipping through about 200 pages, she stopped and placed her hoof on a certain spell. She could feel all her friends' eyes on her, and she desperately didn't want to disappoint them. She heavily exhaled and turned the book around to show them. This is a psychic communication spell. With it, I should be able to contact Fluttershy. I tried it out earlier today, and I think it works, but I just need confirmation. Now, Pinkie Pie? What is it, Twilight? The pink pony responded. Did you hear me try to talk to you about 30 minutes ago in your head? Oh yeah, I thought I was only hearing things, Pinkie stated, starting to hop around the library. It was so amazing. I was baking some cupcakes, and when I heard you, I was like, what? But I got back down and finished baking. She suddenly stopped bouncing. When you talk to Fluttershy, tell her Pinkie says hi. Okay, Twilight? Twilight breathed a sigh of relief. I'll do that, Pinkie, but I don't know if this will work. We still don't know what really happened. She turned the spell book back around and skimmed over the text, absorbing every detail of the spell's mannerism and inner workings. All right, here I go. The unicorn started, readying her stance. She focused her energy to her horn, concentrating on all the intricacies of the spell and Fluttershy herself. I hope this works. The forest was exactly as Fluttershy had figured. It dense with fully grown trees whose leaves blocked nearly every ray of sunlight. Small green sprouts dug through the leaves of the previous fall, vines creeping and wrapping themselves up some older trees. She could hear some of the animals' cries, the sound fighting for her ears' attention against the rustling leaves. The path she was on was cut in a specific manner, weaving through the trees, but it was still difficult to find where that cry for help came from. Help me! The deep, accented voice howled. Fluttershy immediately stopped her admiration of the forest and burst out into a full gallop. She turned her head side to side, making sure the pony in peril wasn't in the forest thicket. Just up ahead, she saw a figure running around, something attached to its arm. She came in closer to get a better view, seeing a brown stallion with spiked back brown hair running around aimlessly. A long striped ferret creature was attached to its right forelimb, blood leaking from the bite. She noticed him turn toward her as she thought of what to do. Could you help me, please? The pony desperately tried to shake the creature off. There's a briefcase over there. If you would, could you grab a Pokeball and help me out? This thing just won't let go. Fluttershy stood there, confused. She had never heard of a Pokeball before, but somehow it sounded familiar. She looked at the briefcase, her body telling her to move closer, but she ran toward the pony instead. Hold still, she said calmly to the pony. He stopped shaking, but still winced in pain. She grabbed the ferret with her mouth on the back of its neck and tossed it aside gently. Before it could turn around, Fluttershy was in a wide stance, staring intensely at the creature. It turned and instantly froze in fear. Don't you do something like that ever again, do you understand me? She scolded. It's not nice to hurt other creatures like that, and you know it. Her staring became more intense, causing the ferret to whimper and sit. She came closer, brushing its fur, and patted it. There you go. Now run off, little guy. And with that, the ferret ran off into the thicket. She brought her head back up, closed her eyes, and smiled. Suddenly a sharp pain jolted through her head, forcing her head into the grass. This had never happened before when using her stare, but as quickly as the pain came, it left. You did it without a Pokemon! That's amazing! I've never seen anything quite like that before! You have an amazing way with these creatures! The brown stallion complimented her as he walked over and grabbed his briefcase. What's your name? Fluttershy lifted her head and shook it, trying to recoil from the pain. Glancing at the pony, she swore she had seen him before in Ponyville with the exact voice. He wore a lab coat with an hourglass symbol sewn into both sides like her shorts. It's Doctor Who's. I'm gonna do a Doctor Who's. Sorry. I'll do a Doctor Who's accent next time he talks. I'm, Fluttershy, she stated, thinking for a moment. I think I just moved in just south of here. She lowered her head and ears in confusion. Fluttershy. Interesting. I've never heard of a filly with a name like that. It's quite a good name if you ask me. I'm the professor, Professor Birch. He shook his forehoof a little more. You know what? Take a Pokemon as a reward. Obviously you're better with them than I could have imagined. Take any one. It's fine by me, the professor said. There was that word again. Pokemon. Like everything Fluttershy saw, it seemed familiar, but was completely foreign to her at the same time. She slowly trotted over to the briefcase and pushed on the latches. Inside, on black cushions, were 3 red and white balls with a white circular button in the center divide. She picked one up and stared at it. Thank you, she said sheepishly. It's, nice. The professor scratched his head. Well, you can't see it if it's still in its Pokeball. That just isn't how it works. Fluttershy looked at him confused. She had to know what this Pokemon was and how it could fit inside such a tiny ball. She pressed the button with her nose and it opened, sending a shining white light from it. The light and sound startled her, causing her to drop it and step back. She watched as the light started to take form into an animal. Her wings opened in a defensive position as she stepped back. The light faded, revealing a green, upright, standing gecko. It stared at her with its head cocked. What is that? Fluttershy demanded, not knowing what to think. The brown pony stared in disbelief. You've never seen a Trico before? Everyone has seen it on television in Hoenn or anywhere else. He shook his head and nudged the Trico to get closer to Fluttershy. Kids these days, so sheltered. She got down near the Trico and examined it for a little while. Something already told her that she already knew what it was. Aren't you adorable? She finally said. I guess I need to name you, huh, little guy? The lizard came closer and rubbed its head through her mane. She could only smile. Meeting a new type of creature after the past event's hardship lifted her spirits. How did you even fit in something so tiny? The professor walked over, seeing Fluttershy lay there with her new Pokemon. He smiled and sat down next to her. You have a great way with animals. I'm impressed. Thank you, she responded. He dug through his bag, pulling out a thin red plastic tablet, and gave it to Fluttershy. This is a Pokedex. It will show you everything and anything you wanted to know about Pokemon and the region since you seem to be new to it. It's quite handy. Now take it. I need your help with something. He looked down at his right foreleg, small trickles of blood still pooling from the bite wound. My son Brandon is out doing research. Brash boy, but I need him to come home. It's getting dark, and as you can see, I'm a little out of commission at the moment. So I need you to go in my steed. He's just north of Oldale Town, which is just north of this forest. He nervously stood up, her ears drooping at the thought. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. She shuffled one of her 4 hooves in the grass. I don't know enough about this place to do that. No, you can't do it. Take that Trico and run with it. Travel the world. You just moved here. You should be excited by all of this. Even if you can't get him home, which I'm sure he'll do anything necessary to avoid it, explore everything. Give it a chance. She felt something tap her hide, the Trico trying to get her attention. The amount of confidence in its face astounded her, trusting her completely within a minute of meeting her. I guess her spell did work, she thought out loud, grabbing the Pokédex with her mouth and placed it in her bag. I guess I can help. Great, Birch stated, hobbling back into town. Hopefully the trip will help you get your head straight. Fluttershy watched him as he limped off with his briefcase back into the forest. If you need anything from me, just ask. I'll be in my lab in Littleroot Town. I'm sure you'll be fine without me, but if you ever need my help, I'm sure I can provide it. The wind blew through the trees, and calming sounds of the leaves reached her ears. She let out a small sigh and looked at her new gecko friend. If you're going to join me, I'll have to give you a name. Fluttershy looked up in thought. How about Tricky? The gecko scoffed and turned its head. Oh, maybe Leaf? It sneered, huffing out from its nose. Alurus? It thought for a moment and looked up at her with content. Good. Now climb on my back and I'll fly us over. At least I'll try. Alurus leaped into the air, landing with a small impact onto Fluttershy. Gently, she said, unfolding her wings. She took a couple seconds to adjust her wings for flight again and took off. The forest was so thick that branches and leaves obscured her path. Slowly she dodged and made her way around them without any harm done to her or the forest. Hovering, she checked to see if Elurse was all right. He was a little woozy, she noticed, so she flew at a slow pace to not upset him any more. I'm sorry about that, she reconciled quickly. Soaring above the forest, Fluttershy looked over the massive expanse of land and sea. She'd never seen so many towns and villages so close together, even when looking down from her old Philly home in Cloudsdale. It was a long time since she flew up to this height. The sun was setting, the sky was painted with rich yellow, orange, and purples. Flocks of blue and red birds flew alongside her, squawking with delight. Fluttershy smiled back, happy with the wind flowing, messing up her hair. She felt less anxious about the task she was given, trying her hardest to enjoy herself as she soared. Down below was a small town with only a handful of buildings. If Fluttershy was correct, this was the town that Birch told her of. With a flutter of her wings, she slowly made her descent near the northern pathway out of town. After landing, Elurse hopped off Fluttershy's back, dazed from the flight. Are you all right? She asked, getting closer to see if anything had happened. Elurse shook his head and body, getting rid of the woozy feeling he had. With that, he started to walk down the small path north. Fluttershy followed. The path looked exactly like the forest outside of the town she ended up in. She still thought having no memory of this place when waking up in the back of the truck was odd, but she simply chalked it up as stress. After scaling a rock ledge, she saw a young earth pony with several bags of supplies hunched over, studying some of the small creatures in the grass. Fluttershy trotted over nervously. She didn't even know this was Birch's son. Excuse me, I'm so sorry for bothering, but are you Brendan? She slunk back a little. The light brown pony turned around to face her. He wore a strange headband and white hat combined with a black and orange jacket. His shorts were vertically separated black and dark gray with a strange gold square with a cross through it stitched on the side. Yeah, who are you? Fluttershy stood erect, trying to appear more confident. I'm, She thought maybe it was the mountains of stress or a strange lapse in thought, but she had trouble even recalling her own name. I just moved in next door to you. The colt looked at her with suspicion. She caught him staring at Elurse, squinting his eyes to get a more focused view. That's my father's Trico. He normally has those under lock and key. He lifted his head and walked towards the Pokeball that lay in the short grass. He hit the circle button, sending out his Pokemon. A small orange bird with 3 large feathers sticking out of its head popped out and chirped. I know what's going on. Fluttershy looked at him confused, but went forward to examine the bird. Oh my, you're so adorable! The bird rubbed up against her in a similar fashion of Elurse. What's your name, little guy? She rubbed the bird's head and smiled. That's Torchic, and if you would step away from my Pokemon so we can do this the right way, that would be helpful. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, lowering her head and ears, backing away. Torchic stood in an attacking position, staring down Elurse. She looked at the colt, who looked as if everything was completely fine. All right, let's get this battle underway, shall we? Brendan smirked, watching his Torchic prepare itself. Battle? Oh no, I could never do that, Fluttershy said nervously. She couldn't tell if he was serious, but she didn't want to take any chances. She looked down at Elurse, who also donned a fighting position. Elurse, no, we have to... Before she even could finish, she felt a throbbing headache come on, one more intense than the other outbreaks that day. Every synapsis in her brain told her she had to fight, that she had no choice. She ducked her head into the ground, trying to hold on desperately to her pacifist ways. Well, why is this happening? I don't want to fight. I can't take this. With her head still buried in the ground, she heard a strange but familiar voice pierce her head. That you? Please, if you can hear me, say something. Please, leave me alone, she fought back, not knowing how to respond. It's me, Twilight! Are you alright? We're so worried about you! Tears rolled down Fluttershy's cheeks, burning on their way down. Her body shook as she sobbed in the grass. Please, I don't want to fight. Whoever you are, please make it stop. The voice went away as fast as it came, still shaking. She got up, grabbed Alert with her hoof, and planted him on her back. Her vision flashed white, and in front of her was a strange figure. The tears in her eyes blurred her eyesight. But there in front of her was a ghostly wisp with the same clothes she wore. She had brown hair and pale skin, with the same bandana she had and a similar-looking tricot. She couldn't make out exactly what she was, but closed her eyes and shook her head. The ghostly figure disappeared from view. She flew off with massive speed from the path. The urge to battle that raced through her head had subsided, leaving her head clear. She sighed, and with one last body twitch she felt completely fine. Her tears dried as streaks on her face, but it didn't bother her. She was able to fight it. She landed in a nearby patch of grass and watched the sun set behind the forest canopy. Alert lay down and fell asleep, Fluttershy smiling as she took a blanket from her bag. She had no idea how she knew it was there, but she began to trust her new instincts. She laid the blanket on her and Alert, preparing for the night. The life she thought she knew now felt like a bad dream brought on from being in the moving truck for too long. She took a look around her new surroundings, knowing that this is what she wanted all along, and was disappointed that it took her this long to figure it out. She finally forgot the dream world of Equestria that she had imagined long ago. With her new friend in the grass and the one carrying her worries away on the open road, Fluttershy knew she was finally home. Twilight's horn stopped glowing. She drooped down. The spell took more out of her than she had anticipated. Well, Twilight dear, were you about to talk to her? The white unicorn asked. I think so, Rarity, but she didn't recognize me. She started to pace. It sounded like she was crying and said something about fighting. At least we know she still has emotions, though I think she could be in huge trouble. The other ponies looked worried. The situation was dire. They didn't know what happened to Fluttershy and had no way to bring her back. The blue Pegasus spread her wings and flew up in the air. Hey, I know how to take care of this, she stated. Rainbow Dash? Twilight started. We don't have the spell to bring her back. What could you possibly have in mind? Dash scratched her head. Well, this won't really bring her back, but I want you to bring me to her. You know, to comfort her and all. Are you crazy? The last time I did the spell, it was just a deviation. Who knows what the deviation of the space-time rift spell is? Rainbow Dash hovered in thought. Can't you just do the same thing to me that you tried to do with Fluttershy? I mean, if you can do it once, I'm sure you can do it again. Twilight turned to think. She didn't want to risk the safety of another friend. But Rainbow Dash seemed confident enough to the point that it started to rub off on her. She turned to her friend, who waited patiently for her answer. I don't want to do this, but do any of you have any problems with this? It may be a tad risky, Applejack said, but right now Fluttershy needs someone to help her. Who knows what she's going through right now? Yeah, plus it'd be super fun to see ponies she know, right? Ooh, maybe I can get some... Rarity cut her off, trying to talk about over Pinky's ramblings. Well, I don't see how it could hurt. Rainbow Dash, I should make you something before you leave. It might be frigid there. I'll be fine, Dash said, landing and folding her wings to her body. I'm sure you girls can come up with something while I'm gone. Twilight was shocked at the response she got. Every one of her friends were in agreement of Rainbow's brash plan. Twilight had to admit, she was running out of options. Actually, Twilight pondered, I do know Canterlot Library has a book by the same author. Maybe the spell to bring her back is in there. Great, you go to Canterlot and I'll hang out with Fluttershy. I can't leave my friend from Clouddale alone in some weird place. She stood in front of Twilight, waiting for her to cast the spell. I'm ready when you are. Looking around, all the ponies seemed to be in agreement. She took the book, found the spell, and focused on Rainbow Dash. All right, she readied herself, planting her hooves. She was still apprehensive about this plan. Her breath shortened just thinking about it. Finally, she closed her eyes, focused all of her energy on Rainbow Dash. Her horn started to glow in the intense purple light of the previous attempt. She went over every calculation in her head, checking for any discrepancies. To make sure this went as smoothly as possible, the last thing she wanted to do was to lose another friend. "Hey, Rainbow Dad!" Pinkie started, but Twilight could only hear that much as all her senses of her surroundings disappeared. The light from the sun seemed to fade as the light from her horn eclipsed everything else. Tremors shook the library, but she ignored them, concentrating and keeping her eyes closed in strained effort. Her knees shook as the tremors vibrated through the tree, sweat dripping down her hide. Panting, she could feel the energy reach a singular point on her horn. This was it. With the last of her energy, she let go of the spell, launching it toward Rainbow Dash. Exhausted, Twilight's body went limp as she passed out, face first, into the old text. And that is the end of Chapter 2 of Hoennshy. It's a long one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will record Chapter 3, and you can listen to that. So until then, goodbye.